Alright guys, it's me again. Last week we did Greek tortoise care, so I thought it was only fair that this week we do Crested Gecko care. A couple weeks ago at the Saratoga Expo, I got two Crested Geckos. I got one male and one female. They're in separate tanks for right now. Hopefully one day we'll be able to breed those guys. Once they get settled into their new enclosures, I think we're gonna go ahead and try that. But anyway, I'm gonna go grab one and then we will talk about their care. Alright guys, so this is my male Crested Gecko. I don't have a name for him yet. I don't have a name for the female either. So if you guys have any suggestions, you can drop them down in the comments below. He is firing up as we speak. I think he's a little bit stressed out that I took him out of his tank, but that's okay. He's not going to be out for very long. He's a really pretty guy. I got him at the expo as well, the Saratoga Expo, and I don't want him to jump away from me. That was a close call. These guys are great jumpers. They're an arboreal species from the islands of New Caledonia, which is off of the coast of Australia. They like to be up high, so I'm just gonna let him climb up that background right there. I think he will be happy climbing up there. So anyway, they're an arboreal species, so they like to be up high, they like to climb. They actually use their tail kind of to grab onto things. I've noticed they kind of like wrap it around my finger so that they don't fall off. It's kind of cool. They're all different kinds of colors in captivity, but in the wild they're more of like a brown color to kind of camouflage themselves in. Something that's really cool about this, and I don't know if I have the story completely straight, so correct me if I'm wrong, but these guys were actually considered to be extinct. They had searched for them, they had known about them previously, but then had gone back to New Caledonia years later, searched for these guys, could not find them anywhere, and called them extinct. They were gone. So then, I guess years after that, there was a biologist who was working in New Caledonia and during a hurricane, and one of these guys blew in through the window and he found it. And so he knew what it was. He knew that it was a crested gecko, and he set out to search for wherever they were. He knew that they couldn't be extinct if one blew in through the window. So what they found was that there was actually another population of them living on a small island called Isle of the Pines, which is right off the coast of New Caledonia. It's kind of an island cluster, New Caledonia. So they found a group of these crested geckos still living on Isle of the Pines, and now they are one of the most prolific reptiles in the reptile industry, which is really cool. I mean, they were extinct at one point, and now we have tons of them. And they're really beautiful. I mean, I'm glad that we were able to kind of bring them back from the dead. They're really interesting lizards, and they are great pets, I think, because they don't require intensive care. They don't require a ton of equipment either. You don't have to feed them live bugs, which was a big plus for me, but we'll talk about that in a little while. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is their habitat. So these guys are from forests that are extremely humid, so they really need high humidity. I achieve that by spraying down their enclosures every single day, a little bit in the morning and a heavier spray at night. They are a nocturnal species, so that's why I do the heavier spray at night before they kind of become more active. They don't require intense heat. If you you know, Google the weather of Caledonia, New Caledonia, it is not very warm. I mean, it goes between like 50 to 70 degrees, which is really kind of room temperature for most people. So I think that as long as you are in a room that stays in that range, I think these guys don't really need any heating lights or heating mats or anything like that. At least they've done great for me without any of that stuff. They also don't need lighting, which I thought was incredible. I mean, they're living in a forest where they don't get a ton of exposure to UVB lights. And also, the crested gecko diet that they eat contains vitamin D3. So it kind of eliminates the need for UVB. We'll see how that goes. I have heard mixed reviews about that. I think there's a lot of people that still provide UVB lighting for their crested geckos, which is fine. I don't think that that's a bad thing, but I think that we'll see how it goes. If they can get the vitamin D3 from their diet, then I don't see a reason to buy a super expensive UVB light. And speaking of their diet, these guys actually don't really eat a lot of insects. So in the wild, they feed almost exclusively off of rotten fruit. There's tons of fruit in New Caledonia, and they like the rotten stuff. I guess it's just a little bit more stinky, and it attracts them to it. So during times where there's no fruit around, they will eat insects. So you can feed them some smaller crickets and things like that once in a while. And I don't know if you guys can hear, but my cat Bo is outside the door whining. He wants to come in. But he's not going to come in because he would totally go after this lizard. Anyway, they don't eat insects all the time. So once in a while, I think in captivity is good. You know, as a treat once in a while, I think that's totally fine. But mostly they eat powdered crested gecko diet, which makes feeding them super easy. It smells kind of good. It's kind of just like powdered fruit, I think. You mix it with a little bit of water, and I'll show you guys that in a minute. Mix it with a little bit of water and you're good to go. These guys kind of just lick it up. It's kind of cool to watch. They have really cool tongues. Anyway, so besides their feeding and their diet, these guys are pretty laid back. They kind of just hang out all day. They do get a little bit more active at night. Like I said, they're nocturnal. So right now is getting kind of late. I think it's about 9 p.m. here. So that's why I took this guy out now, so he's hopefully a little bit more active. But I don't know if you can see, he's gonna jump here. His colors are getting a little bit more intense as he stays out longer. He's a little bit stressed out right now. But he is absolutely beautiful. I love his coloration. And hopefully I can get some really pretty babies out of him. So yeah, let me go grab the female and you guys can check her out too. Alright guys, so this is my female crested gecko. I don't know how well you can see her, but she is a really pretty girl. She's gonna fire up here pretty quickly, and you'll see how highly contrasted she is when she does that. I don't have a name for her either, so like I said before, drop a name in the comments if you have any ideas. She's a little bit less jumpy than the male, I think. She doesn't like to take leaps of faith, I guess. But yeah, she's a really pretty girl. I'm really excited to see what her babies look like one day. She's really low-key. She kind of just hangs out in one spot during the day in her aquarium. She kind of checks it out, walks around at night, just like the other guy. But yeah, another thing that I wanted to talk about these guys is it's something called caudal autotomy. And so a lot of lizards will actually drop their tails if they're frightened or if they're being chased by a predator. So they literally detach their tails, and their tail wiggles around, and the hope is that the predator will go after the tail rather than the lizard. So uniquely in crested geckos, their tail does not grow back. Many lizards who do caudal autotomy, their tail will grow back. In crested geckos, it doesn't for some reason. So fortunately, both of my crested geckos do have their tail still, but it's really not a huge deal if they don't. Like if they lose their tail, it's like not a big deal. Usually they don't bleed or anything like that. They're totally fine. They might be a little bit off balance for a few days while they readjust to not having the tail. But it's like no big deal. We call crested geckos without a tail frog butts because it kind of makes them look like a little frog. But like I said, I'm lucky that both of my crested geckos still have their tails. Hopefully we don't lose any in the near future. But yeah, I also grabbed here. I'm gonna let her climb onto my shoulder. Let's see if she will. Yeah. All right. I also grabbed their food because I kind of wanted to show you guys the food that I've been feeding them. It is Zoomed crested gecko food. Oh, she's right on top of my head. Yeah, so these guys like to find the highest spot that they can for sure. All right, I'm gonna take her off because I don't want her to jump from there. But anyway, the crested gecko food that I have for these guys is by Zoomed. It's literally just like a powder that you mix with water, and it contains totally everything that they would need. It does have some ground insects in it, but it's mostly fruit because that's really what these guys eat. It also has the vitamin D3, which is super important too because they aren't, in the enclosures I have them in, they are not exposed to UVB light. So yeah, I just wanted to show you guys both, my male and my female. They are not tolerating being handled amazingly well right now. I'm hoping to work with them a little bit more, and maybe they'll calm down, maybe they won't, and maybe they just won't ever like to be handled. So as far as like cuddliness, these guys aren't like super high on the list. I think a little bit higher than the tortoises that we talked about last week. So if you really are looking for an animal that you're going to be able to hold and spend time with, I think you could do that with a crested gecko. It might take a little work for them to calm down. As you can see, this girl is just crawling from hand to hand. She's not jumping. She's not like freaking out. So I don't think that there's a problem handling these guys once in a while. Maybe it might just take a little bit of work on your part. But yeah, so that is all the info I have, I think, today about crested geckos. I think that I'm going to learn more in the coming weeks for sure as I learn these guys' behavior and attitude, and then especially when I try to start breeding them, I think I'll learn a lot from that as well. So if you guys have any tips about breeding for me, or if you have any other tips for me, I guess, about these guys, definitely drop that into the comments. Totally drop name suggestions in the comments because I definitely need a couple names for these guys. This one is the female, the one we saw earlier was the male, so. All right, I think that's it for this week's video, guys. I have no idea what the video is going to be next week, so it's going to be a surprise for me and for you guys, but I'll see you then.